Guys,
Cheers.
thanks for hosting me in your office, especially on your sabbatical.
Absolutely.
You're taking 6 weeks off,
I am.
which is amazing.
2 weeks in,
Yeah,
but made time for this. Yeah. This doesn't feel like work though. So.
I appreciate that. It doesn't feel like work to me either, which is great. All right, so let's start there. It's a really good point. You're taking a sabbatical, 6 weeks off. What the heck are you doing with your time? Are you bored as heck? What are you doing?
No, I've not been bored. Yeah, I don't know. The first couple weeks, the kids were still not back in school, so it was a lot of just, helping out, unwinding a little bit of room. I've got some camping and backpacking and stuff. Little painting, but yeah.
Yeah, all right. So obviously Brandon, founder of Key Renter Denver, which we're really excited about. Andrew, chief of staff. Really excited to have you guys here. Why did you take 6 weeks off? Were you burnt out? What was the reasoning behind that?
Yeah, I have seen a few other people do it. Good friend of mine recently did it, and that was what really got it like simmering for me. And I think like it was maybe a little bit of burnout. I would say a couple of years ago, I did reach a point where I was experiencing that more, and it has been more calm. So it wasn't like this imminent thing, but it did feel, it's also this space of I've gotten more and more out of the day to day. And so I've like found myself kind of honestly just wondering what my place is right now too. And so I thought it'd be just a good chance to take a break, get away. I think it, certainly I'll get the benefit of there's a few things I just sort of unexamined. I still do it. I'm the only one who knows how to log into that thing and approve whatever. So had to hand off those kind of things. Just some space to reflect on what my highest contribution is here and recharge a little bit. Our goal is to get to 5,000 doors, which is about 5x where we're at now. And so, I just felt like this was a time to reflect on the journey too a little bit and come back more focused and ready to keep going.
It's amazing. So it sounds like you learned things even getting prepared for the hiatus, right? What to log in, you knew, other things like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I won't ask you too much about what you've learned because you're only 2 weeks into it. So maybe that's a conversation for a future talk where I'll hear about that. Let's talk numbers. So I wanted to bring you into this interview because I've watched some amazing things happening here at Key Renter Denver. Went to the Key Renter franchise conference earlier in the year, and you were the highest grossing Key Renter franchise, if I'm saying that correctly. So give us some numbers. How many doors, personnel size, revenue, whatever you want to share. Just give some context for the rest of the interview.
Yeah. So about 8.5 years in, we've got 950 doors, a staff of maybe 36, something like that. 3 maintenance techs in there. Some people would list that differently. And then maybe 9, 10 remote, something like that, and the rest local.
Great. So you're flirting with the 1,000 door mark, right? I'm sure it's
taunting. It's been taunting us for a little while.
You're up, you're down. We talked about that a little bit. So Andrew and Brandon and I had a great time kind of getting ready for this interview and talking while the cameras were being set up. So I'm going to have some leading questions based on some of the things, but it's exciting. So Andrew, I want to talk about your role and what you do for the company. So you are chief of staff,
Chief
correct?
of staff. So if Brandon as CEO is setting the strategic vision for what we're doing and where we're headed, I work in partnership with him on identifying those strategic targets and then amplifying that with our team. I would say the way things have kind of unfolded for us is Brandon is certainly at this point the entrepreneur. He provides that entrepreneurial spirit, that engaged in the larger industry, that outward focused approach. I probably am more internally focused. So I'm looking at a lot of the organizational health, organizational leadership, culture, along with our people and culture, Amber. So the 4 departments report to me, and I work on kind of the day-to-day, whereas Brandon's more focused on where we're going.
Big picture. Yeah.
I would add to that. So Andrew's a big, like I say, he's strategic, and it's like I'm not overstating that at all. Maybe one of the most strategic people I've ever met in terms of like he loves games and that kind of thing, like tabletop games.
I like to win.
Very competitive with it. And so, I'll even come with an idea of like, I think we should do this. And he's the one like, just has such a pulse on all the people on the team, who's doing what, where we have, untapped potential, ways we could pivot and shift this. And so he's just very dialed in on where the organization is at right now and how we can, but also very like open to big ideas and big moves and that kind of thing, but helping kind of put the tangible steps into it and that kind of thing. So
great. So almost 1,000 doors, which is really exciting. A lot of people would look up to that. I'm going to ask a few other questions about kind of internal makeup, but before I do that, I want to kind of talk about the big moments in the history of the company, the things that have like really taken you to the next level. So you've been in my sphere for about 4 years, maybe 4.5 years. I've seen you grow tremendously. You've obviously done things before. What do you kind of look back on, or like these were the pivotal milestones that like kept leveling us up to the next level?
Yeah, I think there's a few kind of those inflection points or things that you kind of look back on and see that as a turning point. Early on, I think when I hired somebody to take over leasing and just completely own that side of it, and then differentiate that from like the day-to-day management, and then I was like focused on the growth more. That certainly was like a big one of all of a sudden we started really getting traction with just some proper focus there. When I fast forward a little bit more, I think we talked about it earlier, but we hired, so there came a point where we were up to, I think we were over 500 doors. We had a pretty good team going. Externally, I mean, we had just had this linear growth, but something was amiss for me. Like I knew there was something unsustainable here. Part of it had to do with some of the culture that was going on of like, it just started to be, really had the kind of classic sales versus operations disconnect. But it wasn't just like in this funny way or something, right? It was actually like very dysfunctional. Like we had a leadership team where I think at times you could tell people would say one thing and kind of leave the meeting not really bought in, and there was just a lot going on that was counterproductive. A lot of like the property management side where the narrative was everybody just throws all the hard stuff at us and nobody understands how hard our job is and all this stuff. And like I said, it's the classic sales is like, all we hear is no, they won't do anything out of the box. And, but some real rivals there.
I think you said fiefdoms, or you had a term for that. They were like kind of rivalry teams that were competing with each other.
There were definitely factions.
Yeah,
I would say like that were actively competing. I wasn't there at the time, but as I was on the outside talking with Brandon because of our prior friendship, there were some factions. And there were some people actively working against Brandon too, I think.
Yeah, that's not uncommon. I really appreciate the transparency there. It's not uncommon that people are working against the leadership, the owner. Unfortunately, some people are, they have their own best interests at heart,
Sure.
which we can't really blame them for. But as we know, a really good team is all rowing in the right direction. So what did you do to overcome that?
So back to where this is an inflection point. So I think the aha was just seeing it a little bit for what it was. And my tendency was to sort of put my head down and I didn't like conflict. And so just kind of let it be. But when I think I finally owned that this was not working well and was not going to get us to the next level. One of my thoughts was I'm acting as if I'm trying to solve something new, but really all I need to do is create a cohesive team here and specifically it was like the bigger problem was on the customer service side. And I'm like, there are examples all over the place of people running high functioning, delight the customer service teams that like really complement the growth of the business and all that. So
we're not the first people to solve this problem, right? Yeah.
So I started looking outside the industry for this. I was going to create a new position. I kind of like, I let go of one person who was the head of the property management side. And instead of replacing them with somebody coming from property management or promoting from within, I'm like, I'm going outside and getting someone who just knows how to like run a team, like I said. And so I can really point to that too, of like a turning point in the culture. So that was, Andrew ended up coming on board as so that was Amber Bryant, was who I hired. I think this is like November of 2020, maybe. So initially her title was director of operations, and I was just like, I need you to get this team like rowing in the same
Rowing in
direction.
the right direction.
I think like,
Yeah.
that's the simplest way to say it.
Yeah.
And she had a background in customer service, a lot of like retail, like had worked at Lululemon and some stuff like that. So some places that are notorious for like really great jobs, really healthy environments, that kind of thing. So we started to turn the ship a little bit at that point. We were making a pretty big acquisition. So I think we were at 550 doors or something. So this is now early part of 2021. And then in April, we closed on a portfolio of like 340. So it kind of launched us into this next tier. Andrew came on as the project manager for kind of the acquisition. It was initially just a contract role. It was a good chance for us. We'd been friends for a while to like test this out. I think those two hires, we started to turn the ship on this culture and like really get a strong, healthy culture that was gonna, like you said, it's just that watershed.
Yeah.
Something shifted, and it took a couple of years, but things really started to move.
So these are very tactical mechanisms or maneuvers that you took, and I know you well enough after 4 years, that's where you're going to focus on. And Andrew, you can step in here. But strategically in your mind, when you were like, hey, like the culture, like when did you realize the culture is actually holding me back? Like I got to fix this. This is actually a business problem and not like just a nice to have. Sure. Like I want to like hear about that realization. And was that the conversation between you guys? Or what was that like? Because this is a significant thing in business that I don't think people pay enough attention to.
Oh man, I feel like when I try to zoom back or go all the way back there, it's like the sum of so many conversations, so many frustrations. And it was like a lot of little things. I don't remember, like I can't tell you, it was Friday afternoon at 3 p.m. And like I get this email and I'm like, this isn't working. It doesn't feel quite that clean, but I do remember the first domino to fall was me moving on from this. Someone who'd been with me quite a while, was loyal, I have a lot of fondness for, but I just recognized was not going to be the answer.
Can I just add something to that? Yeah. I was friends with him. I'm looking in from the outside, and I felt like I was very proud of Brandon at that moment, because that takes a lot of courage, because he's absolutely right. She's a wonderful person and had been very loyal and helped get them to where they were at. But he had diagnosed this isn't working, and he had tried to work with her to get her to be the person he needed her to be for the next step, and that just wasn't going to materialize. And so at some point, this is the thing that people who don't sit in this chair don't understand, is even when it's going great, there's a heaviness, a weightiness to being the leader, right? But you have to make those kinds of decisions where you know that it's going to affect their livelihood. You know this is going to affect a potential friendship. But I need to get to this spot. And I felt like that was a courageous decision. It is, for sure.
And so there seems to be an intentionality around the culture, what I'm saying, which is why I'm here and we're doing this interview. Because so we had NARPM, our Denver event. Like I joked with you guys, I was like, there may be 100 people there, and you guys had a whole table. And I was like, are you guys 10% of the conference? But like you brought everybody, like you brought your whole team to that event. And I remember sitting back as a total passive, as a speaker at that conference, and I was like, look at that, like he's bringing everybody here. So I'm picking up from the outside that there's an intentionality to how you want to build your conference, the investment you're making in them. How much discussion do you guys have, and what's the clarity? Like, what tools are you using to really be clear on this culture, and how are you using that to grow the business?
So early on, I would say an inflection point was that acquisition, and we were having to meld two different teams together and really define our new team, and also define like the trajectory. And Brandon and the leadership team prior to me coming on had done some really good work around values That's one of the things that was appealing to me. It's a values-based organization. I wanted congruity, and like that's what I look for in my life. For me to work with and for Brandon, it feels really good to trust him and to trust. And I've seen this bear out not just in our friendship, but as in work, that we're going to do the right thing, even at cost to us sometimes. So we took that value, that values-based thing, and in conversation with The Advantage by Lencioni, we carved out together a guiding document. And that states the mission, the vision, the values, the strategies that we're going to approach.
What do you call that document?
We call it the guiding document.
The guiding document. All right. That's very
It's our name.
It's internal,
Yeah,
right? Like,
yeah.
so it's not
Yeah.
being presented to everybody else.
Yeah.
But we put a lot of work into that in that first
Ton of
summer.
work, yeah.
Yeah.
And that has been a thing that we revisit every quarter. Like, it doesn't just sit on the shelf. We find different ways that we revisit it, but it is something that we revisit every quarter and revise. And we put in front of our whole employees and our team. And so
And we integrated that into like our onboarding process and a lot of
Amber did
there was
lot
a
of that.
ton of intentionality there just on like I think that's well said. It's not just some values on the wall or something like that, but like how do we make this stick at every part of the business? So that I think that back to your question would be another kind of inflection point of like when we really did that and got that. And like before that we'd had values and a mission statement but like it was just maybe it was where we were at the time or where I was at, but it was like we needed that in a new, fresh way that we were gonna like run with. Yeah.
And if you had asked the employees prior to that, where are we headed? 1 in 10 might be able to say where we're headed. You ask our team now, what's our big, audacious goal? Everybody knows.
Everyone knows.
And
Amazing.
and I would say that happened fairly quickly, actually. Like within the first 6 months, everybody knew we're headed in a direction. And I shared this with you offline. I remember when we brought Top Properties in and we were all first together, and Brandon stood up and like shared that vision. And he also just shared how the team that was standing in front of him, was the fulfillment of a part of his dream for KeyRender. I could see how our team engaged with that, like both the security or the excitement about having a big audacious hill to take, but also to have a leader who is authentic and real and willing to be vulnerable. There's a galvanizing component to that as well.
Love the word galvanizing. That's perfect. So let's just talk briefly about that before I move on. I mean, there's a lot of acquisitions in this industry. Some work out, some don't. So a lot of people just look at the acquisition as a door count, not as a head count, right? So how many people did you acquire and how has that worked out for you guys in terms of your team?
Yeah, I think we brought on 7 or 8 people from the acquisition. I always kind of reflect back, like if you ask me how was the acquisition, if we're gonna go to door count and numbers and all that, it was probably not a good deal, right? Like it just
Appreciate the honesty on that.
yeah, I mean we churned a lot of those out. It also like we had a big goal and it forced so many issues.
It
for us.
exposed.
Yeah, it exposed like all of a sudden it was like people who've been doing this a long time would probably recognize, like 550 to 900 or 8, whatever we were at, is like not a trivial difference, right? Like you go from, you can kind of hold it all down with a bunch of direct reports as the CEO and like, little, to like, no, you need legit HR, you need legit mid-level managers.
You need a system and a pipeline of talent acquisition, talent development, career advancement.
You need to really ramp up your onboarding new employees and training systems, right? And
You need processes that are bulletproof. Like it can't just be, hey, I'm keeping it all up in my head and on my emails.
even at 550, I could jump in on the problems and usually kind of resolve it. Like it just, that wasn't the reality.
Just call Brandon if you got a question. We'll figure it out.
You can't stump me. You know?
Yeah.
So it was, I look back and I'm very thankful for that, right? It really, like, we got through so many things, and we brought on some great people who are even part of the leadership team
Core
and that.
to where we're going.
Yeah. So, and people where, yeah, in theory, we could have maybe identified these people and reached out to them and lured them away with a signing bonus or something like that. But that wasn't realistic. Like, we wouldn't have seen the talent without having them on board. We wouldn't even have known. Even some of the people were not in roles that were utilizing their best skills. So you wouldn't have recognized that as, really making an impact on that business. So
that's great share. I don't think enough people think about the culture as they make those acquisitions. They just look at them tactically as it's more business, but people come with that. Systems come with that. You got to figure that out. So I want to ask one question I didn't get to ask earlier when we were talking. If I'm applying, how would you describe your culture? Because that's why we're talking. I've watched from outside. Your culture is amazing. What's the language you use? Like, what are the words you use? Like, how do you describe your culture to me as a job applicant if I'm thinking about?
We should have Amber here to answer that.
Yeah, she would crush it.
Yeah, she loves that question. Like, I don't know that there's anything that gets her more fired up than that. But yeah, I mean, I think like what we've developed through a lot of, and again, it's not like 2.5 years ago or whatever, I started thinking about these things, right? Like, this goes way back, but I had this question long ago of like, what makes property management a good job? And initially it just hit me after I'd made a couple hires of how impactful it is on somebody's life, like what work is like for them, right? So if they're going to show up for 40 hours a week, that may be more time than they get with their family. And it's just not insignificant, right? It's not like they can have a crappy experience at work and still love and enjoy their life.
Go home and be happy. Yeah.
So I just think like that was maybe the genesis of all of this, was me just owning the weight of that. Like, I'm taking on a big responsibility to employ anyone. And so over time, I think I've learned more and more about like what it takes to make this a good job. And part of it is feeling like the work is meaningful, feeling like you're part of something bigger, that the company's going somewhere, knowing what it looks like to win in your role, and knowing what success looks like. So a lot of this has come over time of developing out very, good job descriptions and focus area, that include focus areas and KPIs, and but also it's creating an environment where there's deep, healthy friendship at work. And like,
wait, say deep, healthy friendship at work. Say that again. Is that something you guys talk about? That's a really profound
statement. I talk about it. I mean, I work with my friend.
Yeah.
Like, I've always wanted that congruency.
It's not something you hear all the time when you talk to businesses. Deep, healthy friendship
and you can't force that, but I think you can create an environment that's healthy.
Yeah.
Where, I'm sure we have people here who like wouldn't, if you asked them their 5 best friends, they're not going to list anyone at work. But there's a lot who would, I think, right?
Yeah.
And so, that goes back to first break all the rules, right? Having a best friend at work is one of the things that keeps engaged, effective employees around.
Yeah, keeps people around for a long time.
Yeah. And I think so. Back to what is the culture like here? I think we're a growth-oriented company. We really believe in showing up as yourself, but also striving to be the best version of yourself, being honest, being accountable. We're doing meaningful work alongside, other people who, also care about it and are engaged. What else would you say?
I think if I were channeling Amber, I would say, we're entrepreneurial. We're a growing company. You have a chance to get on board early on because we're taking this in large directions, and you have an ability to help shape and affect it. The leadership is going to listen to you and your ideas and promote the best ones. I think I would also add, like, if you come to Key Renter and you're for a time with us, we're going to invest in you and develop you and make you as marketable and as productive and as talented as we can. We're going to work hard to situate the right butts in the right seats. This actually, I think, is directly related to Brandon and his kind of instincts. And then while you're here with us, we want to invest in you, and we're going to really make some deposits in you, knowing that at some point you very well likely are going to leave.
Yeah.
But when you go, you're going to be that much more equipped and better to succeed in wherever you go. But the agreement that we're asking is, in turn, we get the best version of you, that you show up as yourself, but you're accountable for your work. Let's be honest, mistakes. The only mistake that we can really make is not being honest about our mistakes and not learning from them. And we really mean that. So yeah, I think those are big components to how we kind of create that forward moving culture.
One other thing I'd add is we put a lot of work into just path development. Like I think one of the really big challenges we're up against in single family management is, what does it look like to make a career out of this? Like ask anybody who's like reading, a job ad for an entry level assistant property manager in single family, right? It's clear they've done a great job in multifamily. You can serve your time in leasing and then move up to assistant and then be a property manager and then a regional. Like there's nothing like that in our space, right? So that was one thing I came up against, is like, how do we not make this kind of a dead end thing, or at best a golden handcuffs kind of situation, right? Mm-hmm. So that's something we've thought a lot about, of like, what are the entry level roles? How do we create like robust training in those? So for us, it's the leasing agent and the assistant property manager, where you can come in without specific experience in the industry. You can really get your feet wet, but also like for us, it's a good exchange, because we're getting contribution early on in their role. They have a playbook where they'll know what it's like to win, and we know that our customers are being served well and that good work is being done, right?
And then we get our eyes on them.
Yeah, but from there's like lots of different places they can go as we identify talents and that kind of thing. So we developed out like, what are those possible career paths here, and even like the NARPM, you brought up that we had a big chunk of our team there. I think for me, I saw that like, is it that I think them going to NARPM directly benefits us back, and that they're going to learn something that's going to, save us money or whatever the next day? Not necessarily. It's not that correlative in that sense. But I think what we're trying to create here is that this can be a career path, and part of that is just seeing the industry, meeting colleagues in it. There's through NARPM you can get designations, there's education, all that kind of thing. So it just kind of creates like, this is a real job and a real there's ways to advance in this, and you can stay engaged and grow and continue to like provide value here.
To the point where someone can come into Key Renter Denver, be stewarded in that process, and go out and launch their own franchise.
That's right. I know you've had a previous employee. We should not gloss over that, right? You had a previous employee that actually started their own business, moved across the country to the East Coast. Am I right about that?
Yeah.
Started their own franchise. What were those conversations like, and how did you handle that internally? Because that's actually worth talking about.
Yeah, that was so Alex is his name, and he was here close to 5 years in leasing and then in sales, and it was phenomenal. Like he gave about 1.5 years, I think, before he left, he started asking me about that and stuff. So that for me is just like, I take some pride in that one, because it's like, not because I think he owes me or any of that. It's more just like, that's how we can have a 5-year like chunk of time together that's a win in every way on both ends. It was his first job out of college. He learned so much, grew, but he delivered a ton of value for us, left on great terms. We still talk regularly. He asks questions.
So it's his first job out of college, and then 5 years later, he starts his own business doing the same thing.
Exactly.
We're celebrating right there.
And he's into the point now, he has a few employees, and he's at 80 properties or something.
I love Alex. That's
traction.
So good to hear.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So I wanted to ask about the leadership team as we kind of wrap up here. Amber's not here, unfortunately. So how would you describe the leadership team? Break it down for somebody else trying to get to 1,000 door mark. What's your leadership team look like? Is it a good model for other people to follow? What are your thoughts on that?
they'd have to make that call on if there's anything to glean here. But yeah, happy to share why it works for us. So we have myself in I think trying to be a traditional CEO role, like with focus on capital allocation and strategic planning, that kind of thing, as well as like an oversight on people and culture and development. Then we have Andrew as the chief of staff. Really, again, I think we talked through that, but like working with me on what our key initiatives are, what we're focused on, what the problem areas are, what we're doing about it, and then just like he runs our like all hands meeting, our weekly all hands meeting. He does a great job just beating the drum both corporately and then with like department heads, and he'll take those, if he sees a little lost lamb, he's quick to jump on that and like provide some guidance there. And even like he has like a very delicate way. People like talk very fondly about him. Like he was a pastor previously, and like I think that's how people still feel. Like this guy can be harsh with me, and yet I feel like it's from a place of he cares and he wants what's best for me, and he's and he's being
the hammer.
honest in it, but he's also like turning up the heat, right? Like this is a kind of communicating to someone, we're at a crossroads here. Like, is this gonna work or not? Like, but we'll be honest with you. He always uses the analogy, I need to kind of put the turn signals on for this person. So a lot of that. So then we have Amber Bryant. She was the one I made the hire that I alluded to earlier when I'm like, I just need somebody with that customer service. So now her title's Director of People and Culture. So she had some life circumstances that forced her to move out of the area. And so that was the time when she had kind of already been shifting to, rather than just being like over the customer service, like the property management side, to like, we really saw that she had some value to bring across the board. And so she started going more the direction of helping with all the hiring, onboarding. She helped us build out like a really robust quarterly review process. So everybody who works here is getting, we sit down with them quarterly. We score them for their work. That determines like a profit share. We talk about their development. They fill out a scorecard. So does their supervisor. The supervisor's in on that meeting with Amber.
She's also really great at having tough conversations or difficult ones.
Yeah, she's doing that traditional HR. Like if you have a problem,
that's who you go to.
That's who you go to.
But people feel nurtured by her and supported by her.
Yeah, great.
She's a good at also like seeding the ground. Like I'm a very good at amplifying what we're trying to do, but she's also very good at reinforcing, but at a more localized way, like in a one-on-one. And she reinforces messaging, and she'll also like seed the ground in terms of the development of a person. So I think she almost prides herself in laying the groundworks for stuff that will bear fruit, and people might not even know she was the one kind of
doing that,
sowing the seeds.
Kind of almost like a counselor like mentality a little bit, where she just can see where people are stuck in life and say like, here's where you're working against yourself.
It's really interesting. As a third party listening to you guys across the table, I ask about your leadership team. There's no discussion about who runs sales, who runs operations, who does finance. You're really like it. You guys seem to be approaching this from like a real people standpoint.
We do have an operations person.
Yeah,
David
we hadn't got there yet, so we were through the first three.
Okay, so
myself
I jumped
Andrew.
into early.
But you're right.
There was a lot of conversation about just people development,
Yeah.
like an amazing amount. So I want to call that out. Like that's unusual. People are like, okay, this person runs finance, this person runs sales. You were like, all right, so Brandon's got the vision. Andrew's making sure that we're carrying that vision. Amber's making sure. So I'll just sell that. I'll say that to you guys. I celebrate that. Like you guys really care about the people side. But all right, so break it down.
Okay.
Fulfill that.
We got two more.
Yeah.
We're almost there.
Give me
So
the rest of
then David Mitchell is our director of operations. Very systems oriented. He's like our lead simple wizard who's built all the processes. That's really helped us get like a more cohesive.
Fundamentally rewired how we do what we do.
In terms of, again, when we made that leap, I saw that like you can't just do the pull up a chair, watch me kind of training. You can get away with that at like 500 properties, kind of. you're still like very much at you better be hiring well, right?
Yeah.
But then you can kind of get away with it.
Yeah.
But like at some point, it's just like we need consistency of what's happening in these interactions and processes. And we had, people running their own spreadsheets to keep track of their renewals and that kind of thing. So,
And can I add something with David? Again, there's a people-oriented part of this. When you can dial in the processes like he has, he's really handing off to new employees and veterans alike. Here's the playbook on what it looks like to be a good property manager. If you run this playbook, you're going to succeed. And he's got a real supportive impulse. Like he wants to be there for the team. And so they'll call him when they have legal questions. They'll call him when they have technical questions. He fields a lot of that. But really, like, don't overlook how people oriented having a good process of workflow can actually equip people to feel like they're succeeding at what they're tasked to do.
Yeah. They want to show up. They want to know they're going in the right direction.
Yeah.
I remember maybe a year ago or something, we had a quote from an employee who was like, what was it you asked Shelly? And she had an answer that was just like, it's just pretty nice. You go and lead simple and you kind of just know what you need to do for the day, and it just walks you right through it. And like,
if you attend to what David created, you're set up for success.
Yeah. I feel like you're doing a good job.
So he oversees all that. He's also our employing broker. He handles all like our legal stuff. We just had like a few new bills come through the legislature that have a direct impact on our contracts and what we're allowed to do and charge and that kind of thing. And he spearheaded all those, sitting in on webinars and talking to attorneys and that kind of thing. So
great.
And then the last one is Alina, who's my executive assistant, kind of to me and Andrew, like to a lesser degree with him, but she's the one who very like dialed in with
special projects, all the statistics, the background, the way everything works. She connects a lot of the dots across the departments.
Yeah,
Right.
just
Keeps you focused on the quarterly goals.
she's the kind of
things
person
that.
she isn't local to our office, but I think this is a good example. Like if I said, hey, that plant needs to be watered like once a week, like 7 years later, you're like, we've never had another conversation about it, but it's been watered every Wednesday for 7 years.
Nice.
So very consistent like that.
Yeah.
She takes on a lot of the things that don't fit inside other people's purview or job descriptions, but are necessary that we need to do. And so then we can come to her and say, hey, we need to tackle this together.
Amazing.
Like she helped with a big switch to a new phone system, for example, and set up
Yeah.
all the phone trees and troubleshoot it and
Great.
handle the migration, stuff like that. So
Okay.
so there you go. There's the 5.
But that's really helpful. I think a lot of people would like to see what that looks like. Winding down, I think that the kind of core story that we talked about out in the conference room as we were getting set up was you felt, Brandon, really compelled to make property management a good job, not something that somebody was taking because they couldn't get a good job, right? Like that was some of the things you told me. So I'm gonna turn on you, Andrew. I want to let Brandon have the final word, but Andrew, what have you seen in terms of breakthroughs? Like, how have we made this a good job for people to be in property management?
Yeah. Well, we've highlighted a few of them,
Yep.
which is you can come in an entry-level position and have a pathway for your career. While you're here with us, we're going to invest in you so that way, if you want to transition into something else or move on, there is a lot of permission given around that. Do it well, and we're all going to shake hands and keep moving forward. And that while you're here, know that also we care about a holistic kind of approach to your life, that we don't want you working crazy hours. We're not going to abuse you. We want, like we really have in one of our values, we state when you're off, you're off. But that's part of our value of being all in, is when you're off, you're off. While you're here, work hard. And Brandon models this. He's in early, he works hard, but he doesn't grind the midnight oil unless it's like something crazy going on.
Yeah.
He's modeling the kind of life that we want to embody across our culture, across our people. And then I would say, like, I think people are proud of KeyRender. Like when they talk to each other, like they recommend they recommend to their friends, come work here. Like they like that has organically happened. And so I shared this with you before. We have what I would call a strong and healthy culture now. And so one of the ways I think about how you define what culture looks like, is it strong or is it weak? If there's an x-axis and a y-axis, strong and weak on one and healthy and unhealthy on the other, a strong culture is when you introduce something from the outside in, like a new employee or a new system or a new situation, is that thing that you've introduced is influenced by the culture and shaped by it. Whereas a weak culture is if you introduce that outside component, that outside in component shapes and defines and reshapes the culture. So that's how I think about strong versus weak. And in the same way, but that doesn't mean you could have a strong, unhealthy culture, right?
Yeah.
Like someone comes into a strong, unhealthy culture and they're shaped and formed by that in unhealthy ways. What I'm proud of, like what we've built here, is what I see as a strong, healthy culture that when someone comes into it, you're automatically being conditioned and shaped by how we operate. And it hasn't always been that way. We've had to fight for that over the years. But I use the analogy with you of it's interesting to see we've gotten to the point now where you introduce an outside element that is what I would call anti-values, or like that feels like a violation to what we're doing. And there are just natural antibodies in our organism now, like in the organism that is Key Runner Denver, that automatically isolate and begin to work on and either expel that thing or condition that thing into integration, right? Does that make sense?
100%. I love when you told me that earlier. I think it's amazing. It's
and
like,
I feel like that's something that we would collectively, that didn't just happen. We didn't just stumble our way into it. We really have worked, the whole team has really worked to define and amplify that, so that now, like this last year, we won. We were one of the best places to work in Denver. We were on the finalist list of one of the best places to work in Denver, and that was something that we set out as a goal.
Yeah, just a few years ago.
Yeah, I remember we had that when we were defining that guiding document. We had 5,000 doors by 2028, but then we had a list of a few other things that we want to do, and one of them was to be recognized as the best places to work. And I remember this was at the middle of things were kind of feeling like they were melting down a little bit. And I remember Brandon saying, we might not ever get there, but I still think it's a worthy goal for us to pursue. And then 2 years later, we got there. And that was like, all right, like plant the flag on that one.
So well said, Andrew. I definitely have learned today. I love this idea of like weak culture versus strong culture not being the same as good culture versus bad culture. But this idea that when you bring a strong, like I'm a strong personality, you hire me, I show up. If it's a weak culture, I'm going to probably bend it to my will.
You will shape it, and it will be influenced by you.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. Whereas you come to work at Rinscale, like you said, our Key Runner Denver, you've got these antibodies. I love that, almost like natural immune system concept. It's like the antibodies would be like, hey, you don't belong here. Like we either need to change you or we need to get you out of here.
That's not how we do things, right?
Yeah.
And like to see it translated now, not from us, which it was early on.
There was a time it was us, like working hard on like where are the hard conversations we need to have, and something bubbled up and we got to really hit this hard.
Now to have it happening at second and third levels in the organization,
pushing people,
it's really cool.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that. Like I said, I feel really grateful for learning that from you. I learned that today between our pre-talk and this, and it's great.
Yeah.
Brandon, I want to give you the last word. I think this is all about culture. The reason I'm here is because I've watched from the outside. You guys have grown like crazy, top producing Key Runner franchise, attracting people like crazy, just breaking new levels all the time. What's your final thoughts or best lesson on building a culture? Like, what do you want to share with me? How do I make sure I have a culture that produces people like you have?
Yeah. I think one thing that comes to mind, and this goes quite a ways back, but I think something that clicked for me early on that's always kind of been a guiding light is I think the best thing we can do for people is not view them on like an A player to a C player to throw that spectrum out and just understand that everyone is uniquely gifted to do certain things in certain environments extremely well, right? And that, so I would just say I've found it doesn't mean everybody belongs in your organization and you just need to find the right job for them. Sometimes it's just like, we don't need what you have to offer, or we don't have the right environment for you to thrive. But I think just always staying super curious and paying attention to where are people, like you didn't even ask them to do that and they did it way better than you ever would have hoped, and seeing the ways that people show up. You said this doesn't feel like work, right? So you're doing something that clearly is in your wheelhouse.
Was
that
it
you
a
enjoy.
unique genius, or they have a term for that, right?
Unique ability.
Unique
right? That's
ability,
the strategic coach thing.
Yeah.
But just so I think as a leader, that's something that I would say has been the biggest contributor, is just always paying attention there, and just trying to, like, if something's not working with someone, at least always having like your ears up for what is it they are really wired to do well. And then you'll start noticing too, like the people who do jobs exceptionally well, like what is it that's unique here? So I'll give you a little example of early on. I made a hire and I started to realize, like, you kind of need some thick skin for this thing, right? You hear a lot of negativity, and sometimes you're caught in the middle between, in a tough situation with an owner and a tenant and all that. And I was like, man, you need somebody who's got a little bit of a bouncer mentality, right? Like, I don't care if you like me, I just need to enforce the rules of whether or not I'm going to let you through this door, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But then that can be awful too, right? So then on the flip side, it's like, okay, well, I just need the person who's great at customer service and they love people and delighting people and all this thing. That person will flounder in this environment too, because sometimes you just have to like lay down the law and be stern about something, and that's all you can do. And you can't keep telling them, oh, let me check and get back to you and all this stuff. So it's just like, that's an example for me of like understanding it's more nuanced than like, oh, there's just people who are people, and then there's the bouncer mentality, right? Yeah. Like there's people who know how to dance between those and can go home at night and not let that one thing eat them alive. And so that's just like one example, but like I think as you continue down this road, like in this business, like just noticing more and more of what thrives in certain roles, and what are those like subtle little talents you're looking for that really set people up for success, and you can empower, and then they're going to just flourish in this, and it's not going to feel that hard. And
That's great. I do think in so many things in business, like knowing what ideal scene looks like is the easiest way. Like, you know what you're looking for versus just showing up and taking what the market or the team is giving you, actually knowing what you're looking for. And it seems like you guys have that. You have a ton of vision for that. So really appreciate it. I can't wait to see what's next. We're going to break the 1,000-door mark soon, right?
Yeah. Before the end of the year.
Before the end of the year.
For the end of the year. Yeah. On to 5,000.
All right.
Thanks, guys. Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.